Welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the studio at St. Thomas University. I'm Mayor Manny Cid, and with us today is Erik Fresen. How you doing, Erik?
How's your man? Excellent. How are you?
All that's good. Good to have you on. So we usually start off the show a little different, talking about whys, this, that, but I think with you, we're going to start off with something that I see across the country. So a lot of people throughout the country that mean well and they run for public office and they're lost in the sauce, right? I think what you've shown and what you did during your time in the state legislature, right? He was I don't need a state representative, but the chair of K-12 appropriations. I mean, ran a $33 billion budget. Was before that was an aid. I mean, it's done a lot. But I wanted to touch upon that because I think that'll break the ice really good. Talk to us about your experience as a state legislator, and the difference between elected officials that get elected with experience like yours, how you hit the ground running, and people who mean well, but they're completely lost. Because I think you're a great example of somebody that hit the ground running and got things done.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think my experience can be analoged to a lot of different, to very similar advice that I would give to kids or to students wanting to get into almost any career. And that is, to whatever extent, whether it's in sports, media, broadcasting, poli-sci, whatever it is, business in particular, you want to try to see what opportunities at the front end, at the starting point of whatever career you're looking for, you can break into so that you can have a certain amount of responsibility, but not all of the responsibility on you, so that you can more than anything observe and listen, pay attention. So I had a unique unique circumstance where I was studying at Florida State University, which happens to be in the state capital of Tallahassee. And just by the good fortune of God, I was taking a Florida politics and history class at Florida State. My professor at the time, who was actually a Miami guy, who was a practicing attorney in Florida State, but also an adjunct professor at Florida State. His name is Bill Fiver. He was actually a star all-day pitcher at St. Brendan back in the early 80s. He was the adjunct professor, but also at the same time was helping to run then state senator candidate for Secretary of State Katherine Harris's campaign. Wow. So this is a lot of history. You guys can Google all of this later if you want, but she had, in the course of that semester, she wins, because it was in the fall semester, she wins as Secretary of State. She hires him as her Undersecretary of State at the Capitol, and he basically just picked 3 or 4 of his best students to come in and be aides in that office. So I mean, I came in at 20 years old. I think I was maybe 19 turning 20, and got exposure at the top cabinet level with an Undersecretary of State with some responsibilities, not many, but a complete vantage point of everything that was going on, at least in that office. So at the time, I got assigned to the Division of Elections, to be the chief aide to the director of the Division of Elections. And I bring all of that to you because in that office, they basically put me, because of the fact that I was from Miami-Dade and I spoke Spanish and different things, they put me in charge. Back then, there was no electronic filing. Everything was done paper in hand. You received actual written reports. You had to be able to interpret them. You had to be able to call down to your counties. So I had everything from Orlando South, all of the races, all the legislative races, all the anything that was a sheriff race or a constitutional office race. I was essentially responsible for their campaign reports. In that process, I then met several people. Then candidate, second time, Jeb Bush, was running for governor again in the state of Florida. He had barely lost in '94, and he was running again for office in '98. One thing leads to another. I meet a couple people from his campaign team. I work on his campaign in Hispanic outreach. He happens to win the governor's race, and then I get assigned as part of his whole team to the State House. In the State House, I happen to get assigned to the K-12 Education Committee. So I've always told people, man, that you never know what plan God has for you. Like, people just assume, oh, you've been in education forever. I'm like, yeah, but if the governor and the speaker of the House then would have assigned me to the insurance committee, I might have become the insurance guy. If they would have assigned me to the environmental and regulatory, I may have become the environmental guy. I got thrown into the education committee, which was amazing because at that time, then Governor Bush was launching what was going to become what is now still known emphatically as the largest educational reform program in the history of the United States, started here in Florida. So that year, I got to work hand in hand with committee chairs, senators, House members, lawyers, everybody, as we were kind of redoing the entire statute of education funding and the policy from A to Z. We rewrote the entire code. So that experience then led to me working for the actual chairperson of education in the House, and then the chairperson of education in the Senate. And I bring you that long story just because I know a lot of people oftentimes want to find the path of least resistance and whatever gets me there quicker. And especially in today's world, listen, I have twin boys that are about to graduate from high school. I know, them and their entire cohort of friends, they have, I think, a little bit of a disconnected concept of how quickly you're going to get to the goal that you want to get to, and everybody wants everything now. And while I was able to follow a trajectory that got me eventually to the career that I chose, man, it was a long process. It was many years to finally get to a position where maybe I felt confident enough to be able to maybe go run myself. So to your point, Mayor, what was beneficial for me is having 6 to 7 years of experience in the very environment that's Florida legislature that I was thinking I might want to run in. So I did run in 2008. I was back in Miami, had already started my career, had just gotten married a few years before. My twins, my now 18-year-old twins, had just been born at the time. So I ran for an open house seat, had already had so much experience on different campaigns that it wasn't a new thing for me to run a campaign, especially for myself. Knew the work that had to be put into it. You got to do the grind. We did the grind and we got elected. To put the kind of the bottle cap on your point, by the time I get elected and I start as what's called a freshman legislator, I was immediately, which was very rare at the time, given a chairmanship in education, because although I was young and although I was a freshman legislator, I had more experience in the legislative process in the education policy area than anybody even that were juniors and seniors in the Florida House at that time. So it was an incredible kind of realization at the time that all that work that was put in led to having at least a very confident level of preparedness when I got elected into office. And I can tell you that the difference between myself, let's say not me, Erik Fresen, just a person that had a lot of experience coming in, and all of my fellow freshman legislators, they were lucky to be on a committee, little less get any kind of responsibility. So the ability to be able to go on a quick trajectory upward was fully informed and predicated on the amount of work I had put in before and the amount of kind of legwork and sweat equity that had been put in to be prepared for that. So I would say very specific to politics, but I think it's applicable in any career that you choose.
And you got that right. That's a great lesson. And I wanted to start off live because it is a big issue in our society today. I mean, just look at politics nationally, look at politics locally. The amount of people that don't know what they're doing is really concerning. I mean, it's getting to the point where folks on my council, on the county commission, on the state legislature, and in Congress who get elected, they mean well, but they're completely lost and they're dependent on the bureaucracy, sometimes that does not have the interests of the people in mind. And then you see all these issues happening. So Erik was able to break through it. I think that's an example. You hit on that. It's an example for anything else you want to do in life. Get involved today, get an internship, and make sure you move forward. But to that point, let's talk about your success. Yeah. So from day one, you were that freshman chairman. That does not happen. I mean, there are members who represent my community that, they're sophomores, juniors, and they still don't have a vice chair to show. So today, looking back at your service in the state legislature, what are those successes? Because I've been in meetings with you that you're like, yeah, I remember writing this, I did that, this university and this is why today's that, because so talk to us about maybe your top 5, top 10, or I mean, those successes that you're most proudest of.
Yeah, so, the first thing that I did, so very quickly after my sophomore term, which is, so in Florida, just to put a quick little context, there are 8-year term limits. So you can do 8 years in the House or 8 years in the Senate, and that's it, you're termed out. So in the House, that's 4 terms of every 2 years you run, and you get basically 8 years. So unlike, and now I'm glad that a lot of our local communities are going to term limits. I'm a huge fan of term limits. I think that term limits give not only does it give the public and it gives the voters and it gives the citizens the understanding that they're not going to be stuck with this person for the next 30 years, so that person has to realize that, hey, you either have this amount of time to get something done or you don't, but we as a public are going to cycle you out, within 8 years max, if not sooner. So I had that kind of I had that kind of notion and that understanding that my time was very limited in the House, and I needed to kind of get as many things done as possible. What I saw as the biggest problem in Florida at the time was really on the budget side. So Jeb Bush had come in and changed a lot of policies on the K-12 side in particular. In higher ed, he hadn't really touched much of it. So higher ed at the time had an ever increasing, and you guys will be sensitive to this too, because you're in a university that's obviously tuition based. In Florida at the time, there was runaway tuition increases across the state university system, both on the public and the private side. It seemed like there was no end road to when these tuition increases were going to go. So one of the first things I did when I became the budget chair is that I froze at the state university system level, which are the public schools, your FIUs, your UCFs, FIU, which are the ones that the state actually controls and funds. I basically froze tuition and reset the entire paradigm of how a school did its budgeting. So state universities at the time, they were adding administration and adding buildings and adding a million different things. And all they were doing was, we want to grow. They were basically pre-funding the growth before actually having the students to service them. And then whatever they needed from a budget standpoint, they would put it on the back of students in the matter of tuition. So when I said, look, the tuition has already gone up from the time that I graduated Florida State, which is 1999, to the time that I got into the legislature in 2010, 2009. But by the time that I became chair, tuition had increased at the state university system level. I'm not even talking about the privates. The state university system, it had gone up 180% in a matter of 10 years. So there was inflation times 60 on the increases. So we froze that and then started to really get our hands dirty into what was going on in the state university system. Obviously both private and public, but as a legislature, you have more responsibility with the public universities at the time. What are they doing right? What needs to be replicated? What needs to be refocused? And there was also an issue of the Van Wilders. It might be a bad reference for you guys, but there were a lot of students that were hanging around 8 years, 9 years, 10 years for a 4-year degree. And Florida at the time, and listen, it's fine, everybody learns at their own pace, but Florida was just writing blind tuition checks without any kind of a target responsibility or a commitment that a certain number of your students have to basically finish a degree in 4 years, because we can't be perpetually, kind of funding a no traction. There wasn't a real commitment to being student focused, having a plan, essentially guiding these students to make sure that they're keeping their credits online, making sure that everything is moving along. So there was a bit, what Jeb Bush, I think, I always, say that what Jeb Bush did in K-12 in 99, 2000, we did at the higher ed level in 2010, 2011, and 2012. We kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and said, we're going to reconstitute this whole thing. So, we added performance-based funding to the state university system, which had never been done before. Again, anytime that you're ever going to do anything big in public policy, everybody lights their hair on fire because it's not what they're used to. Manny mentioned the bureaucratic class within government. Bureaucrats are typically used to just doing the same thing over and over and over again. At any time that there's change, their first reaction is the world's going to end. We don't know how to do this. This is impossible. It's going to shut down our university. Kids are going to be able to come to school. So I had countless sit-downs with every university president of the state university system, as you can imagine, to explain why we were doing what we were doing. It wasn't punitive, it wasn't to punish, but it was really just to course correct and to refocus the mission of a higher ed institution, which is to get students to come in, provide an environment where they're going to find some kind of an inspiration for what they want to do in their lives, but also keep them focused on the task at hand, which is getting your degree and moving on into the workforce and into society and letting the next generation come in. So we spent 2 years, and it's a lengthy answer, but it really was a complete from another one from A to Z. We reconstituted the entire budgeting process for state universities and for the Florida college system, which includes all the, back then they were called community colleges, then junior colleges, and now they're called state colleges. So Miami-Dade College, Broward Community College, etc. We redid all of the finances of those, the expectations of degrees, what they were doing, etc. And then kind of actually created a framework to monitor how it was being expended, but more importantly, what were the students getting out of it? Were you getting most of your students in and allowing them to find what they wanted to do, but make sure that it was in line with their capabilities and with their ability to finish that program? So that one was a huge one. And then coming back down a little bit, and just because you just referenced our mutual friend, Dr. Alessandri, in my, one of the things that certainly when I was growing up in our generation, autism wasn't something that was really spoken about, understood. It wasn't really relevant to the extent that there was a family that might have had it. They were kind of living in the shadows. There were no really programs out there. And if you look historically, there was a significant spike in autism diagnoses between 1991 and 2004. It was like a hockey puck upward. It was just the spike in, I don't think it was so much more cases, I just think it was proper diagnosis of students that before you would just say they're slow or they're weird or they're just not social or whatever it is, they were properly diagnosed. But so that was the good part. The bad part was we had no infrastructure in place for those families. So those families had, they had tremendous challenges, not only with the medical part of their kids and the physical therapy and all the therapeutic elements of actually, making their child, be able to be successful or at least grow. But there was nothing within the educational system as a whole that had wraparound services for those families. There was one state appropriation at the time that was for what are called the Centers for Autism and Related Disabilities, the CARD centers, which we have one at NOVA and at UM called UMNSU CARD. They had been funded at a certain level in 1999, 2000, and had been static for 12 years. So while their population was increasing by 500%, the budget part wasn't increasing at all. So it took a lot of negotiation with the Senate side in particular. I don't know why they were the Senate typically happens to have older people in it. The House typically happens to have younger people in it. I think it was a generational, it was a generational gap. A lot of the state senators then didn't really know about autism. They didn't think it was that big of a thing. And I was quintupling. I was five-folding the funding as a base. So not only was I going to do it that year, but I had to argue for getting their base up 5x and making sure that it never goes lower than that, which was the first thing we did. With that, again, we've spoken about different academies that we're trying to replicate here in Miami Lakes or in the northern part of the county and throughout the state. But the amount of awareness, services, inclusion, and just overall commitment to the families that have kids in the spectrum, that, if anything, as far as people that I still see today, that we hug it out and we see it, because I remember their kids when they came to committee, and I would ask a lot of the parents to come up so they can show these senators that were maybe trying to block my appropriation. These are real families. These people exist, and they're not just in Miami. They're in Miami. They're in Ocala. They're in Palatka. They're in the Panhandle. They were everywhere, and they had been in the shadows for a long time, and they were just so relieved to finally be able to tell their stories. So just providing those families a platform at the legislative level to come and tell their stories, I think was huge. I think it did a tremendous amount for, now you go to the Florida legislature and nobody doesn't know about autism. There's an Autism Awareness Month, weeks, everything. There are specific categories in the budget right now for all different sorts of support services for autism, but that was non-existent when I got there. So that one, as it relates to the things that you walk away from in life, whether it's directly involved in politics or just community service or just something that you try to do, whether it's volunteer work or not, when you know that there was a starting point and that whatever you did added to someone's comfort, benefit, or better life quality, there's nothing I can tell you right now. every ribbon, every award that you get as an elected official, every recognition you get as an elected official, all those things you forget. I mean, there's times I look in boxes and I see it, I'm like, oh, and right, I remember that I got. But what you never forget is the impact that you give to families, and those families are, thank God, better today. And it was set on a glide path that fortunately it looks like that Florida has a real acute commitment to those families and an awareness that I don't think will ever go away. And that if anything, is the proudest footprint I left in the sand up there.
That's awesome. And I see the difference. I see the difference today in Dr. Alessandro, who's a great friend, talks to me about you all the time. He's like, man, Erik Fresen was the champion for our families. Before I turn it over to the students, I know they have some questions lined up. One thing I wanted to touch upon, because I think as human beings, sometimes people see our successes in life, right? And they focus on that. But also, I think we're judged by how we bounce back or how we react to adversity, right? And you've had, after your service, right, you had some adversity, right?
Yeah.
Where court trial,
Well, it happened during, but yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. But had nothing to do really with your service. And it was completely outside and you...
It didn't, but the actions did. If that makes sense, right?
No, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Even, and I'll walk some folks through it. I mean, Erik received 60-day sentence, right, for not filing taxes, EPA, whatever.
Form, yeah.
The judge, I'll never forget, because I remember reading it and I'm like, man, this doesn't. The judge was like, I want you to remember this forever. You know, you got to serve Christmas, come out, or Thanksgiving, and I'm like, man, there's some really bad people in our society who don't even serve. You know what I mean? And I was like. But talk to us about that adversity, because I don't think you've had it. And I think for students is we all go through adversity. At some point in our life, we will have adversity, but I think hearing stories like Erik, how you fight through that, how you go through that, I think it's really important.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I, as Manny knows, I advise, or a lot of new candidates for office come to me all the time, asking not only for money, obviously, but for advice, and especially the younger kids, the Kevins of the world, different people that are in county commission and city commission and state legislative offices, and the one thing that I always tell them is, there's one thing that I wish that I would have known then that I know now, is to always watch out for your flank. So, and what I mean by that is, the millisecond in anything in life that you become a public person, whether it's an influencer or an artist or an actor, whatever it may be, as quickly as they want to bring you up, they also kind of want to bring you down. And I'm not saying it conspiratorially, because obviously at the end of the day, you take responsibility for what it is. But so here's, when you're doing business, I do a lot of real estate transactions, and in a lot of the real estate transactions that you do, you start what are called single purpose LLCs for that piece of property, and for this piece of property, and for that piece of property. So I had started doing that in my mid to late 20s. And in my late 20s, so basically right before I got elected into office, I had like 4 LLCs that were open, 3 of which had 0 activity, 1 of which had activity 1 year, but not in 2. And long story boring, I failed to file a waiver of no income. I failed to file an income tax for 2 LLCs that didn't even have activity, but I just didn't file the waiver. In 2011, it was about 2 years after Barack Obama gets elected in 2008. He takes presidency in 2009, and the only reason why I reference that is because when whatever president holds power from whatever party, they pick the U.S. district judges in every single district, right? So the U.S. attorney for South Florida becomes an appointment of that president, right? So whenever president is in power, they select the U.S. attorneys to run those offices. Again, typically a Democrat. If it's a Democrat president, typically a Republican if it's a Republican president. So the Florida legislature had just gotten a supermajority of Republicans in the House and in the Senate. The president, the governor's mansion was Republican. The presidency was Democrat. All the U.S. attorney's offices in Florida were Democrat. At the time, 5 of the U.S. of the U.S. attorney's offices essentially opened up as many cases as they could against essentially mostly Republicans. So at the time, I get a notification in 2010. I get a knock on my door from some IRS agent, and they say, oh, we want to talk to you about, these 3 LLCs or whatever it is. So I go, knowing that, I really had done nothing wrong. I meet with them in their offices, and oh, you know what? Why didn't you file these? Oh, no, I never made income on those. And that one, yes, last year I did. I think it would have been a tax application of $8,200. But just happy to file whatever link fees I need to do or whatever. Okay, we'll get back to you. We'll let you know. I don't hear from them for a year. They come back and they send some sort of a request. I finally get an attorney. They start looking at everything I've done for the last 6 years, because in their minds, politician didn't file a tax form. There must be something nefarious going on. They went through every transaction I had done in 5 years. They took about 2.5 years doing that. They finally came back in 2015 and they said, look, right now the case is dormant. And I knew, because every client that I had ever had called me and say, hey, by the way, I had somebody come over here just to ask what we did. And of course I told them, this is what you did for me, and that's it. And done. 2015, they put the case dormant. I'm assuming everything is good to go. Let me know when we have to file our waivers and whatever it is. I'll pay whatever penalties have to go, and that's it. 2016 comes around, still nothing to do. I'm terming out of the legislature at that time. I term out that November. That November 4th, I'm just walking you through the history of it again, not conspiratorially. I'm just walking you through why it is that you never know, and you always have to just protect yourself. Donald Trump gets elected. Okay, that means that Donald Trump is going to take office in January and replace the U.S. Attorney of the district office with one of his own. Gets elected November 4th. November 18th, we hadn't heard anything from the U.S. Attorney's office. They sent my attorneys, we have to close this case before January, and this is the offer we're giving them. 1 misdemeanor count, and he pleads guilty, and we're good to go. I go, okay, so if they're giving me 1 misdemeanor count for a failure to file a form, I failed to file the form, I'll take the misdemeanor count, and we're good. We go, just to give you guys a context. To this day, in the U.S. Attorney's Office of South Florida, there has never been a misdemeanor that's been taken to board, period. Because a misdemeanor is like a traffic fine. Little less a day served on a misdemeanor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So we get to the judge, we're assuming all of the history of any misdemeanor that's ever occurred, especially for a file of form that had less than $20,000 of implication. You'll get probation, you'll get some sort of whatever. But to your point, the judge, again, I'm just saying it because you have to be aware of your political realities and where your potential enemies are going to come from. Appointed by, obviously, a Democrat and everything else, goes off on a tear because the judge at the end of the day is the one that issues your sentence. So we're assuming you'll get, a couple months probation, whatever it is, and he goes off on as an elected official, you have this responsibility, this and that, and he gave me 60 days. So I looked at that and I said, look, at the end of the day, I didn't file the form, and I get that. At the end of the day, I chose to be an elected official. I chose to have potential enemies, and this is the consequence of that action. Did the sentence? It added a whole. And here's the thing, man. The older you get, the more you realize, especially if you're someone of faith, that in a weird way, and I know you guys hear it all the time, and it sounds like a cliche, but God has a plan, and it's a very interesting thing, because I can tell you this now, having now gone through that system. If you think that the education system in this country was broken for a little while and a little fractured, the criminal justice system in this country is a disaster. The amount of lack of communication that there is from anybody, those detention centers, they would make your skin crawl if you saw. Forget about the actual inmates and everything else. I'm talking about just their operation. There is $18 billion being spent of your tax money on that system, and it is the most disastrous system in the world. So I remember, as the first 15 days when I came out, I remember telling my wife, I now know if I ever get elected again, what my next reform is going to be, and it's going to be this thing. So in a weird way, it gave me an open portal to something. And by the way, in a weird way, you meet a lot of, speaking of well-intentioned, but you meet a lot of people that were well-intentioned but went the wrong way, and they become aware. You meet a lot of people that are probably need to stay in there because they're delusional and they'll never take responsibility for their actions and everything else. You meet every kind of person in there, but you also see very quickly that that also is a human. That also is a human population. That it is something that you still have to be aware of, and to the extent that you ever have or are blessed to be in the position to effectuate or perform that, do that. So in one of those, weird roundabout, Dios sabe lo que hace in Spanish, the God knows what he's doing, it also became just a learning experience for me as well. So, you bounce back from it. I think that if you have, family, again, I've been married with my wife for almost 30 years now, I have 3 beautiful kids. If you have strong family, strong friends, and more important, a real sense of who you are, and if you know that you run your life with a North Star being decency and faith and doing the right thing, no matter what trials are going to come around your way, and I hope to God it's never, a day in prison for you guys or whatever it may be, every trial that comes around, so long as you look at it not as a woe is me, but you look at it as, why is this happening? What is there to learn from this, and how is that going to, help me, continue the trajectory of my life? That's how you got to take it. So in a weird way, it clarifies things for you. Every time that there is anything that happens in your life that is a downfall, and they're going to come. I mean, the mayor can't be more clear, guys. I would love to tell you that your lives are going to be rosy all the way through, but you're going to hit some hiccups. You're going to hit some trials. Just don't cripple. Don't cripple. Look at them as fuel to better your next step. And that's what you do. So in a weird way, I never got a defeatist out of it. I almost got like a revival out of it in a weird way. It kind of just and in a weird way, it gives you a different look on life and lets you know how quickly something will go from very good to very bad, and what you need to do to make sure that it never goes that way again. There's probably going to be another trial, that happens in my life at some point. Hopefully it's not anything, too grave. I mean, listen, as a parent, there is a never ending. You wake up and you go to sleep with the fear of, I hope something doesn't happen to my kids today. So every day that you wake up and nothing's happened, you praise God that because you see so many examples of things that happen with other people. So yes, was it a trial? Yes. Do I know people that have lost children, wives, husbands, mothers too young, car accidents? Man, when I put things in their proper perspective, I'm blessed. I'm blessed, and I look at it that way, and everything else, you just kind of, you triumph through it, man.
No, that's very powerful, and thank you for sharing that, because I think that's very inspirational. I don't think you've ever had a chance to really share.
Not in the public.
Yeah, but I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
Right? And hearing that from you, so I appreciate that. I'm going to turn it over to the students. One of the segments that we do, they get to ask you some questions as well. Anyone want to break the ice? We have one there in the back.
So to clarify, you got sentenced for 60 days?
Yeah.
And you served that?
Yeah. So what he did was, and again, to contextualize, he actually said it. He goes, while a misdemeanor never serves, especially, again, I never had a real traffic ticket. There had never been anything on my record for anything. So when you combine misdemeanor, first time offender or whatever it is, he had to contextualize why it was that I was even going to serve 1 day, little less more. So a misdemeanor, have you ever looked, even a jaywalking ticket has a potential maximum sentence of 30 days. So a misdemeanor for a failure to file a form had a maximum of 6 months. So what he did was he used the math. Instead of 6 months, he went 60 days just to, use the math with it. And then recognizing that, obviously I have my own firm and my family and everything else. What he did was that he broke it down into 4 15-day periods. So I did, and to his point, what he did, which was, again, you never know where somebody's vial is going to come from, but he actually stated, and I found it odd that he would state that. I thought he would have just done it, and then it actually has that consequence, but he actually stated, and for you to learn, part of the 60 days is going to be Thanksgiving and Christmas of that year. It was just whatever. So it was 15 days. I would come off for a couple weeks, 15 days, come off for a couple weeks, 15 days, but all here in Miami. It was all local. I would check into the same place and do the 15 days there. So it was four shifts of 15 days. Yeah.
And like how long did you spend in between the 15 days, like that periods? Like how long were you out for? Let's see.
15, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15. Yeah, so for a 4-month period, half a month at home and working, half a month in, half a month, half a month, half a month, half a month, for 4 months.
And what would you say is like, because especially if you're in county jail?
It was a county jail, so it was, since it's a tax issue, it's a federal jail, so it's not what's it called here, TKG, whatever.
Oh, okay.
No, it wasn't there. So it was actually all locally at the Federal Detention Center, which is downtown, right by, I don't know if you guys know where the county hall is, but it's right by there. If you guys know where the children's courthouse is, it's literally right next door. But it was all local.
What would you say the hardest part about that experience was? Was it the food?
No. I mean, listen, I'm a pretty disciplined workout guy and eater, so I pretty much eat the same thing. I'm like a dog. When I eat the same thing twice a day, every day for 10 years, but 20 years. But no, I mean, look, is the food great? No. Is it? The worst part about it is, man, without question, is the lack of control. You have zero control over, you know what I mean, over anything. It's the being at someone's control and behest. That is the toughest part. It's especially if you're basically just a decent person, kind of walking around, you're still essentially in yourself. That aspect of it, I would say was the toughest part. The loss of independence is the toughest part, I think. Everything else, listen, the human, you may not know it now, and you guys are blessed if you've never had, kind of a situation, but humans respond. The human condition, you have no idea. You have no idea the extent of your survival instincts until you're put into it. So all of that food stuff and all of that, I mean, yeah, you think that that's going to be a big deal. It really wasn't. From a human standpoint, the not being in control and the losing your independence and your agency. Losing your agency is probably the most crippling part. Everything else is just environmental. It's no different than being, if you've ever gone hunting for a week, you're eating better in there than you are sleeping in a tent. So that survival part wasn't too difficult. Obviously the dynamics of the interpersonal dynamics of inmates, if you kind of want to call them that, you got to feel that out. There's but you figure that part out pretty quickly. But what you don't figure out quickly, and what you lament every single day that you're in there, is that your agency has been taken away from you. Even if it's for a little bit of period of time. So for me, I mean, listen, honestly, in a weird way, when I look back on it, the food and all that, to me, I actually look at it laughingly, because it's, again, the human condition not only has an incredible elasticity for survival, but also for livelihood. Like, what some of these guys would do as meals out of nothing was incredible. So for me, it was just incredibly creative what some people were doing just to kind of pass the time. So I have a lot of fondness for a lot of the people that I met in there, a lot of sadness for a lot of people that I know are not indecent people. They're decent people that just went the wrong way, and they're going to be in there for a long time. And it's just all, no matter what looks alluring, that looks quick, don't ever go that way, because I saw so many people in there that went for a quick buck or for a quick whatever, and they're going to be in there for the next 12 years, and they're not, were there some really bad people in there? Yes. Are there? Without question. And I'm not even saying that the people that are good and decent don't deserve to be in there. I'm simply saying that you're looking at a very decent person that made a couple of really bad choices that are going to impact, basically the majority of their lives. So that's what I look at sadly. All the other stuff, the metal cot, all of that, you adjust to it very quickly.
What other questions? I see another question right there popping up. I don't know. Yeah. We'll go back to you in a second, but we got a couple other ones.
So I get, I know you mentioned like, you know, facing adversity. Can you explain like some examples of any of the challenges that of being part of the Florida House Representative?
Yeah, so, you know, the challenges there are, we have, I think, while an imperfect political system, and I know the systems of a lot of different countries, I think we have the closest, we certainly have the best government system that can possibly exist right now. Could it be better? Of course it can. What is a challenge? One of the challenges, and it's frustrating even as a mayor of a small city, and it's even when you're president of the United States, the biggest challenge is the inability to immediately get done what you want to get done, right? So, for example, even if you're not delusional, which I wasn't going in because I knew what the processes were like to get there, it is still incredibly frustrating. So every time that you guys see, oh, these guys don't do shit. You know, these guys never get, you know, nobody in the federal government, the Congress doesn't do anything, they can't pass a bill. Some of that is to be blamed on personalities and people trying to be performative artists and everything else. But a lot of it is just the way that the system works. It is purposely designed to change slowly so that you're not, you know, so that not everything in our government is happening in knee-jerk reactions to what's happening in that moment, but that you could properly analyze it and look at how we got to this point, what it is that's affecting us and driving us to want to change something, and whether or not that change is going to be worthwhile and won't have unintended consequences 5-6 years from now. So a lot of the things that, you know, I'll give you a perfect example. I don't know if you guys know what the STEP scholarship is, but maybe you have little brothers or sisters. It is basically a voucher for private school. So the Archdiocese of Miami, my daughter is at an Archdiocese of Miami school at St. Teresa. Prior to last year, you know, every parent had to essentially pay for tuition and everything else. So even though we were tax-paying parents, if you weren't in a public school, that $7,000 that you would get for your child if you attended a public or a charter school did not follow your child into a parochial school or into the school of your choice. From the moment I got there, I tried doing that bill. I had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican governor my entire 8 years, and that never happened. Right? So it was frustrating for me because I would get it out of the House 4 years in a row. I got it out of the Senate twice. I had a governor Republican that vetoed it once. A year and a half after I get out of the legislature, they keep on trying the bill and it finally passes. Right? So things like that are, now I'm ecstatic at the fact that it finally passed. I think it's going to change the educational landscape of Florida tremendously, because it's not just going to be, it's going to be every family that wants to find the right environment for their kid is now going to be able to do so regardless of income. And I think that there's nothing better than democratizing a parent's choice. So what was frustrating? Frustrating is being in the head position in your chamber for 6 years and not being able to get past the biggest policy that you're trying to get past. Fortunately, for the state of Florida and for you guys when you become parents later on, and for current parents today, it did pass now. So sometimes it's just a matter of it's not the right, again, God has a plan. I don't know why it wasn't the right time then, but I certainly know that any time is a good time for good policy to happen. But the frustrating parts, the challenges, are knowing that you have done everything you can as an individual member. You've met with every single group. You've met with every stakeholder. You've met with the Senate. You've met with the governor. You've met with the staff. You've met with all the lawyers. You've done everything there, and it doesn't pass for whatever reason, or it gets vetoed, or it gets added to another bill that then becomes toxic, and everything dies, and you're like, oh my God, but don't take mine hostage, and then your thing becomes hostage. So the frustrating part is the process, but the process, I will always say and affirm, exists for a reason. Because otherwise, what you don't want to see is like in some countries that something happened today and they reform a million things all of a sudden just so that they can say that they responded to it. And those reforms are going to have unintended consequences 5 years from now that they're going to have to go chase their tail on. So, you know, our government structure works slowly on purpose, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't get frustrated when you're doing it. It's still very frustrating. And even look, again, Manny's the mayor of a city. You would think that because it's a smaller thing and it's a smaller governmental entity and it's a municipality as opposed to a whole state, and it still gets frustrating sometimes because sometimes your city attorney comes in and tells you why you can't do it that way, or there's some sort of a joint use agreement that you have with the county that you weren't aware that this was going to impact, and they don't want it, so then it gets shut down. So you have a lot of ideas that can't get actualized because of the way that the process works. So it's not, I don't think the process needs to change, but if you're going to go into public service, even though I knew and I still got frustrated, know that not everything that's a great idea is gonna come through as a passed bill or as a passed piece of legislation. That part's frustrating.
So we have time, maybe, for one more question. We got to start wrapping up. I don't know if anybody has anything else. Last question, right there.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, man.
And in your field, obviously you have to be super consistent and you have to have a great team around you. Like you said earlier, your son and his friend, they have like this mindset of they kind of want success now. And that's furthermore my generation in general, around social media and having all these things to look at. Can you explain to us how important consistency is and how important it is to stay engaged but disengaged from social media and the outside distractions and just stay focused on your goals?
Yeah, and look, I think it's a matter of, I don't think anything, especially in modernity, as things get modernized, I don't think anything is inherently bad or good. I know it's a cliche also, but everything in moderation, right? So look, I think social media and the amount of information that's out there, whether real or not, I think it's been a net positive. Okay, I use it. I acquire more information about whatever it is that I'm looking for today in a matter of 25 minutes than it used to take me a month to get, kind of scooped in, because there's so many avenues for information. That's also a problem because there's so many avenues for information that oftentimes you see the first thing that you see, you assume that to be true and you just run with it. So what I would advise is be consistently skeptical, if that makes sense. So whenever you're doing, whether it's social media, or thinking that this career might be good, or whether it's the next Bitcoin or whatever it is, start from a point of skepticism. And then if you're interested in it, actively get as much information as you want. You guys have no idea. To an extent, I'm jealous when I see how easy it is to get, for example, when I used to have to write a term paper, and it was library, it was find 18 books, it was find the pages, it was highlight the pages, everything else. You guys have so much information at your disposal, but it's what you do with it, right? So what I would say is be consistent about your skepticism so that you don't always take whatever the first thing you see is and assume that that's true. The other thing I would say is be consistent about being willing to change. And what I mean by that is, in politics in particular, I always get frustrated when I hear someone say, but you changed your position. In 2002, you said this. And it's like, yeah, it's 2023. Sometimes go where the evidence is, not where your assumption is, and be willing to change your assumption. So what I always say is, rather than don't try to change the evidence, change your assumption. Now, stick to your assumptions, try to figure out if what you think is the right way to go is the right way to go, but be skeptical and look at the other side also, and just make sure that your assumption and the way that you're going actually is the right way. Challenge yourself. So sure, disconnect from social media if you want, but more importantly, connect to the right social media. Because there's some stuff out there that's just, it's just time consuming, and you can sit there and scroll through it and it's just a bunch of people doing dances or whatever it may be. TikTok, whatever. And again, but there is some stuff that's informative as well. So I would say the biggest challenge your generation has, man, and I would say just be consistent about editing. Edit the bad stuff out, be skeptical, and just be very consistent about editing. Just edit out. If a certain site you're really realizing is not adding any value to you other than a couple giggles every once in a while, maybe move that one out so that you're not always consumed by that. And eventually, as you start kind of editing out and fine-tuning your social media, like I use social media, but I have it on follow only, and only on specific accounts that I know inform me on the global news that day, inform me on what's happening locally in Miami-Dade. It informs me now, and there's also some other stuff that's inspirational, for example. So I'm constantly sending my sons and my daughter, I have like 8 or 9 different, sites that I follow that provide really good insights on how to stay focused, on how to stay alert, on how to, not delve yourself into woe is me, or maybe even get into a bad mental health place. All of those kind of things, that's what I try to pepper my sons and my daughter with. So that, again, social media can be a useful tool, is a useful tool. I use it a lot. The challenge for you guys is to edit it, and more importantly, you guys are being bombarded with information from all over the place. Start from a point of skepticism and prove whatever it is that you think is true to be true by actually going out and looking at 3 or 4 other sources. So I think you guys have an amazing ability to be able to condense into 1 hour, finding out some information on something that used to take us 2 weeks to find out, but just don't fall for the first one. See the first one and then go, oh, let me see if this is true. And then go and figure that out if it makes any sense to you. But man, I think just the basis of your question, I could already tell that you're already in the right place, because you're already aware of the fact that it can be a bad thing. You are aware of the fact that it can be a waste of time, but it could also be an incredible tool. So I would just say harness technology, but for a useful benefit to you for your growth, not just to pass your time and to numb your mind into whatever it is that's doing it so that you don't have to think about anything real.
Good questions. And I know you guys have a couple more. Let's hold off to maybe afterwards ask them because we're running up against the clock. We turn it over to you. Any questions? You got
Yeah, no, I love what you guys are doing here with this class. I think that as many of these long form conversations that can happen, I'll give you another frustration, right, that I had. The way that the media still works, the legacy media as it's called, still works is, you are in a position of trying to have to explain a very complicated piece of legislation. And the way that those, most interviews work, you have 2 minutes. Tell me in 2 minutes what you have, because I already have a story written up and this is what I'm going to do. And you can never really explain something in that amount of time. Long form podcast, this is my vibe. This is the way to really get into it. If people have backup questions, you can get into the details of it. So I think from your guys' perspective, the more, whatever topics you're interested in, I assure you that there is a very good high-level podcast out there. My biggest advice to you guys, don't watch the 30-second news. Whatever you're interested in, find podcasts. I listen to 12 podcasts a week. Every time I'm on a treadmill, every time I'm working out, all I'm doing is listening to a podcast on whatever it may be. If I'm interested that week on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I have listened to probably 20-something individual podcasts just on the history of that conflict, because I wanted to really get an understanding, a real deep understanding of what led to the recent events. But that goes with everything, man. Sometimes I'm in the mood to figure out, what are the best ways to, keep blood pressure under control. So I'll go and I'll find the Tim Ferriss podcast or something else when they go on a long form with a very reputable doctor talking about that. My advice is harness the technology, because there's so much good stuff out there, as long as you focus on getting the right stuff. I'm not bashing CNN or Fox News or any of that, but I tell my kids, and I'm going to tell you guys, more podcasts, more long form, less 30-second sound bites. Those 30-second sound bites are pointless. You're never going to learn anything by watching a news segment for 2 minutes on what's happening on this issue. Go find a longer discussion on that issue so that you can really understand the details of what's going on.
That's awesome. So in closing, Erik, looking back for some advice, motivation to that young Erik Fresen, that next Erik Fresen who might be in this class, right, that wants to go to public service, that wants to effectuate change. So some advice that you wish was told to you back then.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest piece of advice that I could tell you that I wish was told to me back then, and I'm not sure how much it would have changed, is be aggressive with your goals and with what you want to do in life, but don't over stress about it. The amount of change that I made, that just the way that life changed for me, and the way that what you are in 21, man, at 31, you're going to be a completely different person than you were in 21. don't over stress or overwhelm yourself with man, I'm already a sophomore, I'm already a junior at St. Thomas, and I still don't know exactly what I want to do. Brother, listen, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I had no idea that taking Bill Pfeiffer's class was somehow in a roundabout way going to get me into an internship. And this, my point is, guys, not everything has a written plan that you go step 1, step 2. Not everything has an instructional guide of step 1, step 2, step 3. Life meanders. The best thing for you to do is don't overwhelm yourself with what's going to happen next. Focus on keeping yourself in the best position available to be able to take advantage of when that door opens. Jump in there. A door's going to open. We were having a conversation earlier about a potential opportunity for someone. That opportunity wasn't there a month ago. It could be a life-changing opportunity, but all that person did was focus on the present and being in a position to where an opportunity, if and when an opportunity, and opportunities will always come, just be in a position to recognize them and take advantage of them. But don't sit here today stressing about how am I going to get there. You'll get there, but just keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward, stay committed, and in a weird way, man, I know it sounds woo-woo, but I promise you it's not woo-woo, because it's just, we can both talk. I guarantee, listen, I knew Manny when he was an aide, a young aide. I had no idea when I saw him at that time that he was eventually going to become the most popular elected official in North Miami-Dade County, right? That happened, but that didn't happen in a straight line. That was it takes some curves, and that's what life is going to do. The only thing you need to make sure of is that you're not just waiting for something to happen to you. Just be active. Just be active, man. Don't think that your life has to be figured out by the time you're 22 or 24 or 25 or 26. Don't think that if you're not 100% certain right now as a sophomore, freshman, junior, or whatever at St. Thomas of what exact career you're going to be at, then you start stressing about it. You're at St. Thomas. Just focus on your current semester. Get past that semester. Meet as many people as you can. Be aware. Put yourself in a position that when an opportunity comes, you're ready to not only take advantage of it, but more importantly, to recognize it as an opportunity and then go after it. And then listen, try things out. I tried out, before I started working in the legislature, I was working in banking. I had a dual degree in finance and in poli-sci. My entire freshman and sophomore year at Florida State, I was in pure banking. I thought I was going to go into industrial and commercial lines of credit and mortgages, because I was doing a lot of that. From one day to the next, Bill Pfeiffer gets this job and tells me to come to the Capitol, and I switched from finance to the Capitol again in 2 seconds. But I was just in a position to take advantage of the. I had no idea what I was going to do. I promise you guys, as a sophomore, I did not have a clue at exactly what it is that I was going to do. But just always be doing something. Always be doing something for growth, personal growth, health, mental, physical. Just stay in a position where you are the best version of yourself, so that when that opportunity comes knocking, you're ready to go.
And there you have it, the incredibly powerful story behind Erik Fresen. Tune in next Wednesday on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X.